Hello, everyone. It's Friday again, and it's the Mike and Mario show. Great to be back. How are you, Mike?
Mario, doing good, my friend. Excited to connect as always, and looking forward to just wrapping up this week. And of course, looking ahead, we got a lot of things worth touching on. So, will be very interesting.
Yeah, let's start with a little bit of the geopolitical situation because I think it's important, not just because we want to look at it, but because how it affects the dollar and the West. I
Yeah,
think people are complacent about what's going on and sometimes dismissive of what they're doing out in Asia.
yeah.
So yesterday and today we've had the Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit
Hmm.
in Uzbekistan, and yes, we've heard that Iran has made a big move to become a member of the SCO,
Yeah,
and a lot of other countries are probably going to become members. And I think the SCO and the BRICS are going to be one thing. And I think already it's the biggest international organization.
hmm,
And yeah, it just goes to show that the friend, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? Because
yeah,
the dollar system has been pushing people around for many decades. They've been using it as a tool as well with sanctions and other punishments like blocking SWIFT.
hmm,
And that people are finally realize we have to build our own systems. And
yeah.
it looks like the SCO, they have 40% of the world population and 30% of GDP, and it's growing.
Right, right. And the sad part is because there's so many other things going on, as you mentioned before. A lot of people are not going to focus on it just because it's no major news as of now. But then again, every handshake, every agreement that these countries make, it all has to do with the de-dollarization process. And this is the first time post health situation the world's experiencing that you got Xi, Putin, and Modi and all the other world leaders under one roof. And it's good to say they're going to be having some interesting discussions that will be against the Western's agenda. So we'll jump in, and I want to actually highlight one of the primary little points that I highlighted here. So this is just a brief summary of all the activity throughout the last couple of days, but it's something that Putin said that stood out to me that I thought was worth bringing to everyone's attention. And we know how unfriendly the world has been towards Russia, but here's a quote here. It says, Putin hails the new centers of power at the summit with the Asian leaders. And so he's basically saying that the growing role of new center of powers who cooperate with each other is becoming more and more clear, Putin told the meeting of the Shanghai Operation Agreement. And definitely he's referring to all the people who are actually at that meeting there. And as they continue to come together, and that's, I guess, that new power center that he's focusing on. And so we'll see how the rest of that plays out here. But there's, as you mentioned, there's Modi calls for a transit amongst SCO nations, wanting to have it so that those cooperative nations can travel freely throughout the region without having any hindrances or whatever. So they're making lots of moves over there. And
Yeah.
of course, we're going to hear more about it as times unfold, I'm sure.
And the reason I said the enemy of my enemy is my friend is that you have countries that normally wouldn't be dealing with each other, like Iran and Iraq. Apparently, there's going to be a railroad being built for the One Belt through those countries. You have Iran and Saudi Arabia, who have always been at odds with each other. They're working together. It looks, I wouldn't put, I wouldn't discount Saudi Arabia joining the SCO or even the BRICS eventually. And you've got, you've got countries that were not very, they're not bedfellows, but they are cooperating because it's the only way. Because there's another headline you showed me before we started that the U.S. wants to sanction foreign banks for using the Mir card, right? Especially Turkish banks. So you could see Turkey joining the BRICS. I think they're looking to join the BRICS.
Right.
So
this is big. This is big here. And so the fact that the U.S. is deciding to now put pressure on nations that cooperate with Russia. And so we've talked about this before, but I want to say all the BRICS nations have signed up for the interbank payment structure railway through the mere financial system or mere payment system. And so that includes all the nations that's right now probably meeting at the SCO. And so it's just a matter of time. We'll see if the U.S. actually enforces this and what their next step would be. Yeah. But this is definitely something we will hear more about, I'm sure.
It's ironic because in the last 30 years or so of globalization, maybe a little longer, the West has exported its technology, its manufacturing to all these countries.
Yeah.
And we've indebted ourselves. We are in trouble now in terms of the debt and the financial situation. And people don't realize that all these countries, they don't need us anymore because they've got everything they need, all the manufacturing, the technology. Yeah, maybe they won't have Gucci or Louis Vuitton or Rolex or whatever, but I'm sure they'll come up with substitutes.
Right.
And I think we're making a big mistake in the West because instead of, well, I guess in a way we're pushing them to do this. So
right. Exactly.
We're not going to go. Maybe eventually we will make up, and the whole world maybe will become more friendly towards each other and do business and trade. I think that's what it's all about. Instead of having conflicts all the time, which we've had
right
ever since the UN was created, and the UN was supposed to be peacekeeping and end all wars, so to speak.
Right. And I think it has everything to do with, you know, what Russia or Putin has mentioned about that whole multipolar world order centered around the direction that the West gives to the rest of the world and they're supposed to follow. And so he's calling for a more diversified accountability, especially when it comes to the monetary system. So it doesn't surprise me one bit. But to go back to that article I was referring to of the nations that might fall under sanction happens to be all of the the Eurasian countries as well as those SCOs. So we got what it says here. It says Turkey, Vietnam, Armenia, South Korea, Uzbekistan, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, South Ossetia,
South Ossetia, Abkhazia. Well, South Korea is interesting, isn't it? Because South Korea is not supposed to be doing this kind of stuff.
Right.
South Korea is like supposed to be a close ally of the U.S. and the West.
Right. So that's definitely a surprise there. So we're going to hear more about this, but let's move ahead into some other articles related to these events here. Let me pop it up on screen here. So here's another little interesting tidbit worth knowing. Iran and Uzbekistan signs a 17
memorandum of I forgot.
Yeah, let me see. I had it.
MOU.
Memorandum of Understanding.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah. Okay.
As the two countries seek to expand their bilateral ties. So while the West is bickering and arguing, those guys over there are just signing away and further uniting outside of the Western control.
The U.S. doesn't bicker or argue. Unfortunately, the U.S. tells people what to do. It's
right. And if you don't do it,
our way or the highway, or
right.
You know, if you're not, like George Bush Jr. said, you're either with us or you with the the other guys.
And then
I don't want to say the word here.
Right, and like Hillary Clinton said, we came, we saw, he died. He died. Unfortunately, it's not funny, but we know how things go out there. So, all right, let's keep moving. A couple more headlines here. Definitely want to touch on. And also, you mentioned here's a headline here about Lukashenko. And his viewpoint on where things are heading. He says SCO can become a global organization to address the problems of the world order. And so you mentioned also that he wasn't invited to the ceremony along with Putin.
For the funeral, state funeral of the Queen on Monday. Yeah. So Putin, the president of Russia, and the president of Belarus, they weren't invited. So it's interesting. That the guys were pushing for the SCO, and then you have President Xi Jinping of China. He's not going to show up. He's going to send an underling for the state funeral.
Yeah,
which is going to be another huge taxpayer-funded event. They're going to spend as much. A huge ceremony in the palace for all these foreign dignitaries. You can imagine how much that's going to cost.
Have they given any figures yet as to the cost?
I don't know, but there's supposed to be like 1,000 people there, so it's going to be quite big.
Oh man, let me look this up. Accused so here's just a little headline, just typed it real quick of some numbers. I'm not sure. It says this from New York Post here. It says Queen Elizabeth's 7.5 million funeral security costs will be prices in UK history.
Yeah, well, that's just the security,
right? That's just the security. So wow, like yeah, Britain's taxpayer funding at use there, huh? I had an interesting back and forth rant the other day, just talking about the monarchy and how, outside of the mainstream media flooding us to remind us of its importance, on the underside of things, there's a lot of people in alternative media space expressing their displeasure. I've actually seen signs of people out in the streets along, I guess, the funeral processions type of things, expressing their displeasure. And so it's like, yeah, it's just they're trying to keep it in the forefront of our minds, but the rest of the world would rather move on.
Yeah, but there's a lot of people, the majority are like there to the opposite. The monarchy is still very popular with a lot of people in this country. So,
yeah. Now, so as far as the because MW says traveling around to 4 countries, not sure. Will there be will her coffin be?
Well, I think she died in Scotland, so they moved it from Scotland to England. But I think Prince or King Charles now he went to Scotland and then he went to Northern Ireland. I don't know if he's going to Wales. Usually they overlook Wales, but yeah, I mean I think that's what he means, 4 countries, because the United Kingdom they call it the home countries: England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland.
Yeah. All right, let's keep it moving. All right, so let's change subjects a little bit. Let's get into the precious metal side of things, because it looks like due to market activity, things started off a little bit down, but it looks like it recovered rather surprisingly.
Yeah.
I find it interesting that I looked at the markets today and saw that everything was in the red, including gold and silver. And I'm thinking, like, how is it possible that everything usually trends downward at the same time? Because in prior times, it would always be the reverse. As something tanks, something else, picks up on the other side. But here we are today, but it looks like gold and silver is back up in the green slightly.
Yeah. And yesterday, gold, and this morning during London time, gold broke like the lows for the last 2.5 years.
Yeah.
So technically it wasn't looking very good. It was around 1660. So the fact that we've come back up like this while the stock market at the moment is still down
right,
350 points, the Dow, it's quite encouraging. And the other thing as well, yesterday gold had a bad day, made a new 2.5 or 2-year low, but silver didn't make a new low, a recent low, because the recent low was below 18. It stayed around just below 19. And today, silver's leading the way again. Yeah. Silver's up like 1%. It has been up more. And gold is up 0.5%. And the gold-silver ratio, if you want to show that chart, is starting to look better for silver, which is encouraging.
Yeah, here we go here.
Yeah, because you see the big spike in 2020. That's when we had the collapse in March of 2020, and silver underperformed gold a lot. And right now we're kind of having a collapse of the stock market, bonds, and everything. And yes, gold has gone up quite a lot versus silver, but it looks like now it's turning. And the further down this chart goes, it means that silver is doing well. Yeah. So this means that either the stock market and the system is stabilizing, or we're going to still see some kind of crash in the stock market and bond market, but precious metals are going to go the other way this time and go up, because usually in the precious metals bull market, silver does a lot better. And so that's encouraging, I would say, that gold-silver ratio.
Right. I'd agree. And hopefully it goes that way continuously, just because I did notice the other day myself how it wasn't a typical smash down all the way across the board.
Yeah. And yesterday as well, a lot of the mining mining stocks held up relatively well despite the bloodbath in gold.
Yeah. And then also, so a lot of concern right now happens to be about what's happening with FedEx and their CEO, who came out and said that, he basically came out with their little Forex guidance calls saying that 2023 is going to be very bad. And he threw out the word worldwide recession just because their sales is down and whatnot. And so it spooked the markets. And of course, it's not doing too well itself. And this is the first time it's been this low in quite some time for FedEx. And I was like, this is definitely something to pay attention to, because this could be the front runner for more bad news like this to come, even though we know the world's in a recession, but still, they haven't been allowed to tell that yet.
FedEx is part of the transportation Dow Transport Index. And if there's the Dow theory that says that the Dow Industrials and the transportation, they need to be trading in tandem. For example, if the Dow makes a new high and the transports don't, it doesn't confirm it. And the reason why the transport is so important is because if an economy is doing well, people are buying things, and people and companies like FedEx are shipping a lot of things.
Yeah.
And the CEO said that they had a forecast for 2023, but they've had to pull them because he said things are changing so quickly and are so uncertain. So, and he said not just for the whole world, but also for the United States. So maybe with that, you could jump into that Atlanta Fed GDP now.
Yeah, let me grab that one. Oh, here we go. Yeah, here we go, right there.
Yeah. So this is a forecast that the Atlanta Fed makes. It's the green line. That's the Atlanta Fed GDP now estimate. And you can see that at the end of August, they're going for 2.5% GDP for the third quarter. And now it's almost down to zero. But more interestingly, the blue chip consensus, which I think is the banks and other economists, they've dropped below zero. And they are usually, their forecasts are usually higher than the Atlanta Fed. So we've had already the first 2 quarters of negative GDP, and it looks like we're going to have a third quarter of negative GDP. But of course, Brandon says we're not in a recession.
Yeah, that's not, no longer, those rules no longer apply. It won't be a recession.
You're going to have 35 consecutive quarters.
And so, speaking of which, Dude Boy mentions that he says, according to Arcadia, says that Crimex and LBMA silver is being drained, and I think Rafi also reports for those guys as well. So, I assume this difference in the silver smash down percentage wise is a lot different due to perhaps that silver squeeze is underway. You think?
Well, yeah, and the silver I spoke to Andy Sheckman actually earlier today, and he said he thinks it's going to come from the exchanges, not the small retailers, even though I think the silver squeeze movement is helping marginally. But he thinks a lot of the managed money, which is like hedge funds and the CTAs, they're heavily short because they were long a few months ago because they thought, oh, we've got inflation, we got war, we're going to go long gold and silver. And yes, gold and silver did move up, but not that much. So they got frustrated, turned around and shorted silver, while the commercial banks, the bullion banks, now they're net long silver, which is a rarity. So, and yeah, people have been noticing that a lot of the silver has been draining out of the COMEX, and it's not going into what they call eligible stock. It's just disappearing. So it means big money is starting to buy silver.
Yeah, and I wonder what will be the point to where they'll either stop delivery, or literally just somehow rewrite the rules of the game and somehow some way change the way that they can the rules in which they would allow the metals to leave their possession. You know what I'm saying? Instead, so
yeah, but maybe the metals is leaving to the right people. You know what I mean?
The people, on the inside, they know what's coming ahead. And speaking of which, not unrelated, but something that we all can learn from, because you even interviewed someone, was it from Lebanon a while back? about the whole banking situation. So I'm assuming by now there's a couple of videos surfacing out there of individuals that's fed up of not being able to get whatever remaining currency they have in the bank. So they actually have gone to the bank and held the banks up themselves to get their funds out. And so they've had more occurrences like that throughout the country. So they decided it looks like next week to close down the retail banks.
What happened in Lebanon started back in 2019, and for like almost 20 years, the Lebanese pound, as it's called, was fixed to the dollar, and it was, you know, as good as the dollar. And a lot of people held dollars. They thought they held dollars in the banks.
Yeah.
But then the currency collapsed in 2019, and the banks basically didn't have the dollars. You know, they're not going after Lebanese pounds. They're going after dollars they thought they had. And it's very similar to gold and silver, I think. Not physical, of course, but people who think they own gold through ETFs or silver through ETFs or the futures, and then all of a sudden they see things getting a bit rough in the markets and they want delivery, and they say, oh, sorry, you have to take cash. So it's very similar to that, I would say.
Yeah, and so I'm trying to pull up the visual chart just to see what that looks like, but it's not coming up. So, but I was able to find the Lebanese pound in dollar term, or in gold terms rather. So here we can see the Lebanese pound of an ounce over the last 20 plus years, and right now it's 2.5 million.
The thing is, Mike, that that doesn't mean anything because they're using the official pound
currency exchange.
In the black market, this is probably more like I don't know, 200,000. It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, good point there. Man. All right, let's we got a couple more topics here we can touch on. So let's we did not mention about the pressure against Hungary now due to their lack of cooperation with the rest of the EU's agenda to isolate Russia. And so it looks like they have been voted to have some penalties against them because they've been quoted as not being a democracy anymore, just because they don't want to destroy their own country. So it's an interesting little headline here. European Parliament says Hungary no longer a democracy but an electoral autocracy due to the fact they're not following EU orders, basically, is what it boils down to.
Yeah, because they had fair elections, I guess, and they didn't play ball with what the EU wanted to do. It's like the United States. You've got 50 states, and not every state agrees with. And it should be the same thing in the EU. And they use the excuse that Hungary is politically corrupt. Which is like the pot calling the kettle black.
Right.
And they use that excuse to cut funding, EU funding to Hungary. But I'm sure Hungary is probably not too bothered because they're not paying the exorbitant prices for their energy.
Right. And speaking of which, a part of that whole concern that might be a reason why is the fact that it was reported months ago that Hungary was ready to pony up some rubles and actually pay for their energy. So assuming that went through, but I'd imagine this factors in as well as to why they've jumped ship and blaming them for being an electoral autocracy. But yeah, so I wanted, will this be eventually a sign of the unraveling of the EU? Because based upon different nations in different positions right now, more nations were heavily dependent upon Russian oil than some other ones. So it looks like the eastern wing of the EU area are the ones that are on the fence more likely, whereas in the southern areas that are all heavy EU, like, for example, France, I'm hearing their energy is good. They're supplying energy supposedly to the northern nations. Is that correct?
Well, the French government is subsidizing a lot of the prices, but I read somewhere that because France, I think 60 or 70% of its electricity is generated by nuclear. But apparently more than half their nuclear reactors are either closed or under repair. So I'm not sure how long that will last, the contained prices. But what you asked there about the breakup of the EU, I would say it's probably the the time in which there's the biggest possibility of such thing happening.
Yeah.
And I think we'll have to wait until next spring to see how the winter goes. If it's a very cold winter and very difficult, you could see people in different countries say, oh, we want to make up with Russia because we don't want to be in this situation next winter. And and then some people will say, oh, but we're going to become independent of Russia. But it's going to take years to get the infrastructure going, because the natural gas and a lot of the energy from Russia was something that was set up during the Cold War in the 60s. The Soviets were already shipping natural gas to West Germany back when you had the Iron Curtain. So you can't do that. So maybe I think it will be, but who knows if the EU survives or not. And you also have the financial aspect of all the debt that the Eurozone countries have. Sorry, because a lot of people forget that you can be part of the EU but not in the euro. So if you're in the EU and use the euro, you're in the Eurozone. So that's another big problem there. You could have a collapse of the monetary system or a collapse in political
structure.
Interesting.
So Chris, we'll get to your question in 1 second, because I want to mention this as well in reference to the whole EU situation, just to show how dire things are there. And so it talks about firewood prices, shortages spell cold winter for Europe's poorest. And so when you got a scarcity of firewood, I'm thinking like, obviously all trees don't burn the same, but I just thought this article just shows how serious things could be this winter due to the energy issue when you got firewood prices skyrocketing as well. So, so basically by spring, as you mentioned, we will have a better understanding of the status of the EU in its entirety, because I'm seeing a lot of reports also about Germany, literally like concerns of Germany having had too much power over the last decade plus to where they're taking the biggest blunt of things as of right now. It seems
they're the ones who need the most energy, because they still manufacture a lot of things. They haven't been completely hollowed out, their manufacturing, even
not
though
yet. So Chris, we'll get to this. So it says that if the Fed decides to fight inflation and the banks start failing, they will have to let them go. They can't fight inflation and print money at the same time. Is this correct? Thanks. They're not letting the banks go. The banks are in position as a primary focal point of the central banking system. So I don't think it's going to be an easy just let them go type of thing, just because the big banks are shareholders in central banks. So they exist basically to make the banks whole, in my opinion. So I'm not sure how to play out though, but what do you think?
I think the Fed's close to stopping raising rates. I think they'll raise next week, but things are getting quite rough, and I think they'll find an excuse. And then if inflation keeps going higher, which it probably will, they'll blame it on another crisis. And
serious? I find it hard.
That could happen. I don't know, but I don't see the purpose of the Federal Reserve is to always bail out the banks. Yes, sometimes they let one or two go. So it's
one
not
of the
obvious, but the central bank was created by the New York banks, JP Morgan and those kinds of banks, to basically use taxpayer money to bail them out, and they've done that for over 100 years.
Yeah. Now I swear. So basically, you think this is going to be the last rate hike, and then they're going to pivot and use
no, I don't think
just stop or pause.
Yeah, they'll pause.
So,
and the QE they haven't really been doing that much. They said they're going to do 45 billion every month from June, but if you look at the balance sheet, it's barely moving lower.
Yeah.
So they'll find an excuse, I think.
Yeah, I just think it's I think it'll be, I can't even say in their best interest, but to push it to the limit and use something in a system breaking as the reason why they try, rather than
but
just keep things paused. Because if they hike another 75 basis points and just keep it there and just wait and see how things play out and try to deal with issues as they arise accordingly, then that prolongs thing. I just think
I think the economy is breaking already, though.
Yeah,
because we've had the 30-year mortgage rate above 6%.
Yeah,
it's more than doubled. The consumer's feeling it. You can see the GDP forecasts. You see FedEx. I think we're there already.
Yeah, and I think because of the midterms. So the midterms to me could be the reason why they are not trying to admit anything by pausing prematurely, because they are still running on the fact that things are what they call a growth recession. They're trying to orchestrate a growth recession. I heard the headlines. And so however that is, whatever that means, that they want to still trend upward with these rate hikes, in my opinion, just until they get through midterms, because all hell will break loose next year, without a doubt. You can't hide that, I don't think.
Well, I'm not sure the midterms makes a difference, because back in 2008, the whole thing almost collapsed in September, October.
Yeah.
Just before the midterms. And then they threw everything at it.
That was the introduction.
They might do the same thing now.
That was the introduction of quantitative easing, though,
to
the world. And so now the world has been already. So you think go back?
They bailed out the banks as well with TARP and everything. They bailed out AIG. So they could do the same thing now.
Yeah.
And maybe
so they can use that. They can use their old tricks up their sleeve. Just go back to that
and say, we saved everything. Vote for us.
Yeah. So Chris, I guess long-winded answer to your question about the banks. I don't see them doing anything that would hinder the furtherance of the domination of the banks over the world economy. Like, I think the G-SIBs will definitely, because they have the most systemic risk globally speaking. So I think they're going to try to do something to not make them whole. But then you got to realize that, the Dodd-Frank bail-in is still a part of the equation as well. So they're going to have some capital, I think, somehow, some way.
And talking about banks, maybe you could put that tweet about Jamie Dimon, what he said about the economy.
Oh, yeah. I didn't pull that up. Let me grab it real quick. Shoot, and go back here. But chime in on that one, because I did not mention it. I did not grab that one, but I'll grab it real quick.
Jamie Dimon is saying that he said a month or two ago that we're facing a hurricane, economic or financial hurricane. Now he's saying JP Morgan warns the U.S. Is headed towards something worse than a recession. So I think it's breaking already. That's what I mean.
Yeah,
you don't have to have an accident maybe in the markets, but in the economy.
Now, so the only thing we have to compare in reference to what's worse than a recession is a depression. But then again, that could be considered light in reference to what he might actually know is coming from a global standpoint. So, all right, let's get some questions in. Let's get some questions answered. Feel free to throw out some questions. Let me see what's happening in the chat. I do see questions ahead of time. I saw something here. Here's Matthew says, do you think the 2022 market crash will be the pivot for the Fed into QE and to bail out the banks? Pivot. That's what we were just talking about. Don't really see a pivot. Mario sees more of a pause. I see a continuation until something outright breaks. So whether it be this year or next year.
I think they're already bailing out the banks anyway, because they've got this facility, New York Fed. It's a repo facility. They're providing tens of billions for all the primary dealers already. The bank's already been bailed out.
Here is a commenter. Thought says, good evening from Abu Dhabi, United Emirates. Recently, Hong Kong dollar unpegged from the U.S. dollar. How likely is it for other currencies to unpeg like all Middle East oil producing countries in this environment? Ooh, that's a loaded question. Let me see. How likely is it for other countries to unpeg?
Well, it's probably going to happen, Sir Son. Hopefully, I pronounced your name right, because a lot of these countries now they're moving away from the dollar. So maybe they don't care anymore of keeping a peg to the dollar. They're going to keep a peg to the yuan or the ruble.
Yeah, yeah. Let the currencies free float until there's possibly a new announcement.
And I think the problem with Hong Kong as well was that it's linked a lot to China, and the Chinese yuan has been dropping quite a bit against the dollar. So maybe that's why the Hong Kong dollar couldn't keep its keep its peg. And the other thing as well with global trade, because of the pandemic, it's probably hurt Hong Kong a lot. So they couldn't keep enough dollars for their reserves.
Here's a comment or statement. It says, I think what is EU are doing with themselves is a big plan for U.S. to crush the EU economy for Germany manufacturing run to U.S.
I don't disagree. It's also geopolitical because if you read what the German chancellor, who I think he became chancellor towards the end of last year, Olaf Scholz, you look at what he was saying in his campaign, he thought the world is going to become a multipolar world, and that Germany had to work closely with Russia and be friends with Russia while still being friends with the US. And I don't think the US liked that, because Russia and Germany being very friendly would be a huge, it would be a lot of competition for the US. So I agree with you. I wouldn't put it past the US to be doing this on purpose to really crush Germany. And if you crush Germany, you crush Europe, because Germany is the economic powerhouse of the EU, even though the French might argue with you about that.
Yeah, here's another question here from Evola Sunglass says, question, do you think Italy is the weakest link in the EU?
Probably, but it seems like every country now is the weakest link. Even Germany, unfortunately, has become the weakest link. But yeah, in Italy, we've got elections on I think it's the 25th next weekend. And the right-wing coalition is expected to win. And we'll have to see how that goes. But
how's the situation in Greece as of lately in comparison to Italy, as far as, because I'm looking at the debt to GDP ratio? It's
huge. It's huge. I mean, Greece bailed out a few years ago, but but Italy would be like a big domino to fall. So he's right about that. But unfortunately, all countries in Europe now are weak links because of the of them shooting themselves in the foot. And I heard yesterday Ursula von der Leyen, who's the EU Commission president, German woman, she said, we'll be with the Ukraine till the end, until we need to. So it's not going to help relations with the East or Russia.
Yeah, and here's something I did notice I want to bring up, but I didn't really get a chance to read into it, but here's something here. Money Metals breaks ground on the largest gold depository in the Western United States. And so I found this to be interesting. 40,000 square foot vaulting and fulfillment facility in Idaho. So they definitely got plans on, getting their weight up and holding some weight. But I wonder how and why this will unfold in the months ahead with this particular establishment here. So, but that's always good news. I mean, it's a depository. But then once again, if society breaks down, how would that fare out? I don't know. What else we got here? Any updates on the railroad strike? Ray, great point there. So they have a temporary agreement of some kind, but I'm hearing it's real shaky. Like it's more, might be more say so than actually some signatures signed that make a difference.
I heard that they're offering them now like a bonus of $11,000 and 25% pay rise, backdated to 2020. I mean, that's inflationary. Or maybe they're just trying to pretend that, or they're just trying to delay the inevitable. I think the last rail strike in the U.S. was in 1992. So it would be a big problem for the economy and the supply chain. It says tentative, doesn't it? I guess we'll find out over the weekend if it gets better or not.
Or somehow, some way it can be drawn out over the next couple of weeks, whatever, just to try to quiet it down, pacify. Because I'm hearing it's more of a labor conditions concern than I mean, a pay, of course, but then labor conditions are extremely tough on a lot of people, which is something they wanted to have addressed. What else we got here? Okay, it says, Aaron says, have you been paying attention to the 10-year bond market?
Yeah, I have. I mean, the yields there have crept up almost to 3.5%. They have been near there for the last few days. So it seems like the Fed, or they're probably buying here to keep it below 3.5, because I think it's an important level. It's the highest since June early this year. So that's why they're trying to keep it below that level, I think, because if it goes through that, we could be at 4% very, very quickly. And that's affecting mortgage rates. That's why the 30-year mortgage is the highest since the 2008, the great financial crisis. It's at 602, I think.
Yeah. And then on top, I mean, I see more and more articles talking about the housing inventory in certain areas that are like astronomical highs right now. And I'm seeing people share their stories of what's happening in the neighborhoods, talking about just the valuation of the homes are just unaffordable, man. And I'm like,
oh, you mean housing inventory is low?
Yeah, no. I'm sorry. Houses for sale are starting to pile up. Houses that are listed for sale are
prices
piling up.
Probably they're going to have to lower
prices. Are coming down, but because they're so overly inflated, they're still viewed as being out of reach for some people. So here's just more details here. Mortgage rates hit 6% first time since 2008 housing crash. So definitely not good. And it's catching the attention of more of the mainstream news sources. So that's never a good thing. What else you got? You see any more comments out there? What else we have?
Let's see.
God is real, no doubt. American freight is the #1 public rail, sucks. If inflation is caused by supply shocks, don't higher interest rates make it more expensive to create new supply?
Well, I'll answer that. Inflation is the creation of currency and credit out of thin air, and it's a monetary phenomenon. Supply shocks, they help prices go up, but inflation's been created already, for decades, because we are in the fiat currency system. But you're right, when you raise interest rates and the economy is highly financialized, you're gonna put a lot of businesses out of business. And if there's less businesses out there, there's going to be less services and products. And so the supply is going to go down. And prices are going to stay the same. That's why I think we're going into an environment where basic necessities, everything we need, not like discretionary stuff, those prices are going to stay up. While things that are luxury and that you don't really need, they're going to go down. So
here's another question. Says, do you think it's possible we still have high inflation in needs like food and energy?
That's what I just said.
Okay, good point. Good point.
Yes to that question, because that's what we just said.
That's that hyper-stagflationary environment that I'd be talking about a lot of. It's gonna be unimaginable highs in price valuation of certain things.
Indy asks, maybe you want to answer that. Where do you think silver will be by Christmas? Will still be in my hands.
Yeah, exactly. Like between now and then, I definitely will be getting more of it. Like as far as the USD price.
I got some quarters here, 64.
Yeah. Some pretty boys.
Well,
So yeah, I'll stay away from prices, man. I'll stay away from it.
Yeah. There's a lot of people predicting $600 silver, and yeah, Cliff High's been saying that for years.
Right. So
maybe he'll be right.
Wouldn't hold my breath, but
the world would be wouldn't be a very safe world with $600 silver.
Exactly. So here's a better question, Indy. You know, between now and Christmas, how many ounces or kilos can you stack for yourself? Should be another question worth considering.
That's a good way to look at it. Yeah.
How many ounces will you be able to accumulate between now and then? You know what I'm saying? That's more what I would be concerned with.
I bought some silver yesterday. So
yeah, I'm on auto ship. So
are you? Oh, okay.
Yeah, partially. It's my own auto ship. It's my own little thing. Yeah, but I make sure I get my own product. So. Question is last week who to look after your kids? Morris, well, who do you look after?
Who to look after your stack? No one but Billy. I think Billy would have, but not, I wouldn't have a politician look after my stack.
It's good to say they're gonna take it. It won't be there. What else? Where do you say? Okay, I don't see more good questions. All right, so we're about 45 minutes. We'll get ready to dial back. So next week we got the Fed meeting. We're anticipating 3/4 of a point.
I think so, yeah. And there was talk about 1%, but when the CPI came out, was it last week or earlier this week?
Yeah,
it'll probably be 70. I think they're still at 2.25 to 2.5. So if they go 3/4, it will be 3 to 3.25. While CPI is still at 8.5, and probably a lot more if you look at shadow stats.
Right. So we'll find out if that's the last official hike before they decide to cool off a little bit and come up with a different narrative. So,
or they could also, instead of in the one after next week, they could raise by 25 or 50. They could.
Yeah. Here's a headline here: Fed will raise rates to 5% to get a grip on inflation. Deutsche Bank says.
Well, I don't think 5% will be enough. If they want to get a grip on it, it has to be 15%. It's like Argentina; they just raised it to 75% their rate, but inflation's running at 100%.
Right.
So they're still inflating.
Right. Because man, 75%. Like, yeah, like just I mentioned this a while ago, but just the savings rate, the interest rate on savings is like 30 to 40%. They're giving 30 to 40% in pesos on your bank account. But yet, once again,
I'd still wouldn't keep pesos though.
Exactly. So it's like, how can you sucker people in and stay? But anyway, I'm sure they're doing it. All right, people. As always, Manico64. Make sure you go check them out if you haven't already. RTD over here, you know me. Anyway, any good news you want to leave us with for the weekend?
Good news.
Anything worthwhile?
Well, just enjoy life, and like you say, work on the spiritual side as well, and be nice to people, even to people you don't agree with.
Right. Exactly. And also, man, like I know weather's changing here. It's starting to get a little nippy. So fall is around the corner. So enjoy the rest of this little bit of good weather you got wherever you're at. Unless you're already somewhere where it's already tropical, then never mind. I'm not mad at you there. But anyway, be blessed, be safe, have a great weekend. We see you guys next week. Peace.